Welcome back. We are all angry, and we all should be. 58 Americans died this week in the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. And some of us are angry not just at the madman who did it, but also those who summarily reject just about any idea on how to prevent these massacres from happening as often as they do now. 58 Americans died this week in the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. And some of us are angry not just at the madman who did it, but also that this time the argument that if only a good guy with a gun were there does not apply in this case, and that there is no Islamic terrorists or white supremacists or illegally obtained weapons to blame. Some of us are angry at those already talking about restricting access to anything or even raising questions about whether there's the political will to do anything at all. So let's talk about what to do and whether there's the political will to do anything. Joining us is Christian Ziegler, State Committee man for the Sarasota Republican Party, Kevin Griffith, the Vice Chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party, and Jacob Ogles, the political editor for SRQ magazine. So, Christian, we're all trying to figure out what to do here. I mean, this is happening, it seems, every year or so. The number of those who die in these mass shootings continues to grow. And people on both sides of the gun control issue are looking for answers. What's yours?
Well, it's still too early. We don't have any facts on this guy. We have no idea what the motive is, which is interesting because typically you find out the motive within, the first 24 hours. But we have no idea. And some of the stuff that you mentioned about Islamic terrorism or terrorists and some of the other things that you said were eliminated or aren't there, we don't know if that's the case or not. So they're going to do a deep dive. We need to figure out exactly why he did this. And I think it's wrong that here we are less than a week out. We're talking about gun control. We have no idea why he did that. We're not focused on the motive, and we're not focused on really preventing that, because that's the only way. Gun control is not going to solve all these mass shootings from happening. And even if you look at the mass shootings, the numbers, people say, oh, they're skyrocketing up. The facts just don't show that.
Kevin?
Well, here's what we do know. We know that a majority of Americans want a assault rifle ban. We know that a majority of Americans want greater background checks. We know that a majority of Americans want people who have mental health issues to not be able to get a gun very easily. Those are the things that we do know. And it's time, if ever, when is the time to have a conversation? Now. Now's the time to have the conversation.
Kevin, St. Leo College in our area just did a poll in Florida. 74.2% of Florida residents or respondents to this poll support some limited licensing, permitting, or some restrictions on certain arms, such as assault weapons. 10.2% of those who responded statewide don't want anything at all. So I saw you were shaking your head, but obviously, 74.2% of respondents, that's a pretty big number.
And that's a poll, but again, it doesn't go to the facts. If you look at the FBI's own facts, there was 5,000 homicides by gun violence, as you guys refer to it, right? And out of that, 25% of them happened in 4 cities: Chicago, Baltimore, and Detroit, and Washington, D.C. All 4 of those cities have something in common. They have strict gun control laws, yet 25% of all gun violence happens in those cities.
Jacob, you're in a unique position because last year you covered the Pulse shooting. You were there within hours of it.
Yes.
You heard what Christian is saying. After covering one of these incidents, what do you think?
Well, one, I think that it's important to note that while you are right that the number of mass shootings by number isn't going up, the level of mortality at these shootings is. We are seeing rapid escalations in the number of people that die in your average mass shooting, and you're seeing the record broken all the time. When I covered Pulse, it was the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. That's been eclipsed just 16 months later. And I think that what's striking to me is there's this tendency to immediately lump the issue of just street crime with these mass shootings. I don't understand why those have to be addressed the same way, and I don't understand why there's a resistance when mass shootings are getting deadlier and deadlier to, at the very least, opening a conversation. And we don't have any hesitation after Pulse about opening a conversation about the influence of ISIS terrorism. We don't have any hesitation talking about white supremacy on the heels of Charlottesville. But for some reason, immediately we want to shut down a conversation about gun control after the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history.
But we knew the motives there. I mean, we knew the motives
Well,
in
the
those
motives
cases
are-
that you brought. We have no idea
Hold on
what
one
caused
second.
this here.
We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on this right after we check the first weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. The deadliest shooting in U.S. history. The president goes to Puerto Rico. The Secretary of State reportedly calls the president a moron. Decertifying the Iran nuclear deal. What did he mean when he said the calm before the storm? And joining us for more is Christian Ziegler, the state committee man for the Sarasota Republican Party, Kevin Griffith, the vice chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party, and Jacob Ogles, political editor of SRQ magazine. Did I say it right this time?
Ogles, it's okay.
Okay,
Don't worry about it, Alan.
We'll get this right. Let's stay on the issue of Las Vegas for a moment, because Christian, you said there's so much we don't know about the motivation of the shooter in this case and a lot of other things, but we do know what kind of weapons he used. We do know from the sheriff's office out there that he had magazines that could hold 100 rounds. We do know that he bought an attachment to the semi-automatic weapon that allowed him to rapid fire. Should anything be done about any of these things?
I don't think so right now, no. And when you look at the stats, if you look at how murders are happening, they're overwhelmingly by handguns. So
I'm not talking about murders per se. I'm talking about the tools that allow someone to take a massive amount of life in a short period of time. But hold on a second. I heard an interview the other day with the man who killed bin Laden, who was in SEAL Team 6, who said that in all his years in SEAL Team 6, he never shot more than 3 rounds at one time.
Yeah.
But we could buy magazines that could shoot 100 rounds in a short period of time.
Well, no, when he was saying 3 rounds, he meant at once. Like he didn't go into full auto, right? And that has nothing to do with the magazine or the clip, as people call them. That has nothing to do with that. It is talking about going full auto. When you go full auto, you don't even have the accuracy that you do when you're in semi-automatic and you're pulling the trigger.
Well, he was
each time.
accurate enough the other day.
Well, no, actually he was spraying the crowd. I mean, who knows how accurate this guy was? No one knows what kind of training this guy did to himself to get prepared. No one knows why he did it. No one knows if someone's given him help. And the reason why I keep coming back to that is just banning, guns and banning accessories, that is not going to stop crime. I mean, last I checked, in Nevada, they have a crime against murder, and he totally ignored that law. And when you have over 300 million guns in the United States, criminals are going to go get guns. They're going to go get these accessories that get banned. All you're doing now is you're banning them from average citizens that are law-abiding.
Kevin, let me.
Average citizens, yeah. This guy had no.
Hold on one second, Kevin. Let me throw a quote at you from Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia. Quote, "I just think that common sense has to prevail, but until that happens, until other people feel the same way, we are at a stalemate, and that's a shame."
We got to have the conversation, first of all, Alan. We can't just say do nothing. We have to have the conversation. And secondly, there are places where I think both sides could come together. I mean, domestic violence I just saw on ABC7 earlier this week in Nokomis, south part of Sarasota County, where someone took the life of a wife and a child in there. That's one of the major deaths from gun violence. There are things we can do to prevent people who have violent records or domestic violence records from getting guns. There are other things that hopefully at least start the conversation so that across the aisle we can make some progress. American people want something to be done. Doing nothing right now is not the answer.
When we talk about the stats, everyone talks about how many people were killed, but some of the stats that go undiscussed, and we haven't discussed it here, is you look at females. I think last year alone, over 200,000 times a female used a gun to stop sexual assault from happening. We don't talk about that. We do not talk about the benefits of that.
You're distracting from the conversation of mass shootings. And that's what we're seeing here.
But we're not talking about mass. We're talking about
Christian.
No, you're talking about gun control. You're talking about gun
Las
control.
Vegas. We're talking about the deadliest mass shooting in the country. And yes, we are talking about gun control as it relates to mass shootings.
But you're talking about gun control. And again, that's why we have to talk about the motive, and we have to talk about how to address these people. Because maybe he was mentally ill. Maybe he had some financial issues. Maybe there's some domestic violence issues. No one has any idea what caused this guy, but you need to start looking at the bad actors, Because last I checked, a gun just can't get up and shoot itself.
Christian, gun control is about means. It's not about motive. That is a very important conversation to have. I got in an argument today about whether the media is spending too much time analyzing the motives of Stephen Paddock. That's an important thing for the media to do. It's an important thing for law enforcement
when you
to do.
look at
But gun control is talking about the method. And we know plenty about that. We know that this man bought 33 high-powered firearms in a year, and we know that there's no national database to alert authorities to that. Look, if there was a classic car gang that started beating up people in the streets of Los Angeles, I expect somebody to knock on Jay Leno's door. That couldn't happen if it was done with firearms.
This is ingrained in the Constitution, number one. Number two,
I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment.
You talk about the method. Well, why don't we have a discussion about gun-free zones? Because if you look, that in Vegas, that wouldn't have been the case. But you look at Pulse, you look at some of these other places that are gun-free zones, but no one wants to stand up from the left and say, let's have a conversation about gun-free zones.
We do want to have a conversation about guns. And
why not gun-free zones, though?
We elect our people to go to Congress and represent us. And you can see the three of us here want Congress to have a conversation about gun control, and they are refusing to do that. It needs to be done.
All right, I want to get to one other issue at least in this segment, and that is Puerto Rico. The president was there this week. There has been a lot of criticism about the federal response to Puerto Rico. It was a devastating hurricane. There's no doubt about that. But Christian, let me ask you about the visuals, because there was the visuals this week. I think we have some video of it, of the president throwing paper towels to the victims of a hurricane, saying to them that you're blowing out our budget. At one point he told people he agreed to have a good time. I'm wondering if that was the greatest visual response to an overwhelming disaster out there.
No, it's not the greatest visual response, but again, you know, week after week I'm coming here and the discussion is always about Trump's tweets, what's he doing, how's he look, you know, what's his hair look like, whatever. That's what people want to focus on. But when you look at Puerto Rico, what we should be focused on is how to help these individuals. And I'll tell you, the governor of Puerto Rico, he's been nothing but praising the president on the help that the government's been providing. You know, Puerto Rico has a lot of issues. It's really sad. We're going to have a lot of those individuals come into Florida, and we're going to welcome them. And as you saw, the governor this week of Florida, he's done a great job there. But no, I mean, the perception and, you know, throwing paper towel, I don't agree with that. But out of all the clips, why does the media pick that clip to discuss? There's a lot bigger issues.
Because it seems interesting that of all the things to do when you were there, to throw paper towels towards a hurricane.
But he was there for a long time. There's also the portion of, look, these ships can't get into the harbor, into the ports to be able to get all of these supplies out. Their truck drivers aren't showing up to get the supplies. Why aren't we talking about that? Why are we talking about paper towel rolls? Seems silly to me.
It's a failure of leadership, and it's that simple. And this isn't a surprise. We prepared here in Florida for Hurricane Irma. They were prepared, or should have been prepared. The governor, I heard, speaking of Puerto Rico, speaking prior to the Hurricane Maria, that they were prepared, and they weren't. And it's the federal government's job. Puerto Rico is part of our country. It's federal government's job, and the head of the federal government right now is Donald Trump, to help and assist those citizens, and it's not happening.
All right, we're going to stay on this subject in a moment, and Jacob, we're going to get to you, but we have to take a quick break. We'll be back with final thoughts when we return. Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Jacob, I'm going to start with you because it was an interesting story in the New York Times today. The exodus from Puerto Rico could remake Florida politics. There are so many people displaced from Puerto Rico. We are seeing already kids coming into the Sarasota and Manatee County schools. What is the possibility that this could cause the landscape of local politics to change? They're already talking about the number of people who are pouring into the Orlando area.
Yeah, in the Orlando area, the Puerto Rican population is the biggest ethnic minority in the city. And I'll tell you, it's something that harkens back to when there was an exodus of people from Cuba into Florida, and that had a huge impact on Florida politics in the 1980s. I think you could have a similar impact, and one interesting thing is everybody who comes from Puerto Rico to the United States is an American citizen when they step foot on the soil on day one. I mean, they're an American citizen right now.
I got to tell you, if you're a Democrat in this area and you want to change the results of these elections, I would imagine a good idea would to change the landscape I mean, I'm surprised that the Sarasota County Democratic Party is not already dropping flyers over Puerto Rico saying, come live here.
Hey, Puerto Rico, hey, remember, Puerto Ricans, come move to Sarasota. Now, I read some article similar to that. I don't know what impact it would have here locally, but we always welcome new Democrats to Sarasota, that's for sure.
Christian, already 34 kids from Puerto Rico have entered the schools in Manatee County. Lesser in Sarasota, but the school district is expecting more. You know, enough people who can't make a life in Puerto Rico, they come to Florida, and it, as it did with Cuba, could cause changes.
Yeah, probably so. It is humorous that the local Democratic Party has to rely on people coming from Puerto Rico to win races locally. But
well, the Republican Party relies on people moving from other parts of the country to come here.
Well, no, I think if you look at our landscape and you look at how many times a county commissioner has been elected that's a Republican, I can't even tell you the last time a Democrat was elected. I think it was 40, 50 years ago.
1970.
1970? Okay, there we go. But, you know, it's going to come down to how do we embrace them? We need to embrace them. We need, you know, you look at the governor of Florida, he's been a leader in this. He's been to Puerto Rico. He's been welcoming them. A lot of those individuals are pro-family, pro-life. I think we have a good shot just as much as Democrats get their vote.
We have to leave that there. But before we go, we want to share with you some comments about last night's topic, the social black belt. The program helps students manage their emotions and deal with the stresses and strains that are a part of everyday life. It is a program Suncoast schools are starting to fund, and we went to Facebook to ask you what you think. Pat says, why do we keep funding programs for things that should be taught and learned at home? Kate says, unfortunately, not all children come from environments where they're taught how to deal with emotion, stress, and how to have healthy outlets. I think the program is great and very much needed. And Deborah says, with the pace of life, bullying, drugs, and gangs and violence, the kids need all the support they could get. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Christian Ziegler is State Committee Man for the Sarasota Republican Party. Kevin Griffith is the Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. And Jacob Ogles is the political editor. Did I get it right?
Don't worry about it.
Of SRQ Magazine.